So the World Rugby Rankings are out following the conclusion of the November internationals. These rankings aren't going to shift for a while. This is pretty much them set for the year. It's not until Six Nations time that we'll see some chopping and changing. Not much happening on this side, but a fair bit of interesting stuff happening on that side. I have got the French kit on today, but kind of for the wrong reasons. If I had a Fijian kit, it would definitely be on. But I'll get to that in a minute. So New Zealand finished the year in top spot with them playing Italy in their final game and with Ireland playing the USA. There was never really likely going to be any significant changes here unless there was a massive upset. Both these sides won pretty comfortably, 66-3 for the All Blacks over Italy and 57-14 for Ireland over the US. So these guys' numbers haven't changed, positions haven't changed. Some guys have mentioned that if Ireland go on a wee run, I think first three games of the Six Nations, they could potentially clock up enough points to pass New Zealand, which would make the World Cup even that little bit more spicy than it kind of already looks now. Like at the minute, you're looking at a lot of these teams, I mean, especially with some of the action that happened over here, on their day, I feel like a lot of these teams could knock each other over. So, yeah, that World Cup is really looking pretty fascinating at the moment. Whereas if you looked at it not that long ago, it looked like for all money New Zealand were just going to romp home. Maybe that's just a New Zealand media thing, but a while back it looked like we were virtually untouchable. I mean, with perhaps the Ireland result on the horizon being the one kind of bit of doubt, and then that seed of doubt has sprouted into a tree, a flipping big oak tree of doubt. So, yeah, I think there's no. Steve Hansen said at his press conference that there's, New Zealand will go into the World Cup hopeful, but so will a lot of other teams, including Ireland, England, Wales, and whatnot. So, yeah, it's definitely exciting for World Rugby times. Wales are still in third with their victory over the Box. They did inch their way up marginally from 86.7 to 87.24. England likewise got a victory over Australia, so they are kind of creeping their way up as well. You know, the teams are close enough that those results register a points difference. So England up from 85.54, 86.22. So these teams have kind of gone up in tandem. So England aren't really making any ground on Wales because, I mean, Wales just had a fantastic November as well. So, yeah, they're not likely to catch them unless we get to Six Nations time. The Box, again, a little bit of a step back. They had a potential chance to hop Wales into third if they'd won that game, but Wales were just too good, so they have slipped back a little bit on the point scale, down from 85.12. The Wallabies, I mean, if the World Rugby Rankings were a touch more dynamic, you feel like the Wallabies may have even slipped further than where they're at. Scotland's win over Argentina wasn't enough to register points. I mean, with Argentina being a few spots behind, Scotland being at home and only winning by, what was the score, 14 points to 9, so it wasn't enough for them to overtake Australia again, because these guys have been swapping places for a long time, kind of week on week for a few weeks now. But Australia, despite their loss, they hold that spot marginally ahead of Scotland. But again, come Six Nations time, that could all change. So yeah, no changes at all in terms of position, just some shuffling with the points. But then you look at Fiji. They had a win. I still haven't seen it. I do apologise. I try to set the games that I'm going to watch on the weekend, especially the ones in Europe. It's kind of the time my kids get out of bed, so it's pretty tricky. Like Super Rugby games are generally on in the evening and at night over here, so for the most part, it's all pretty easy viewing because same Rugby Championship, because the kids are asleep and it's all pretty drama free. The games in Europe are a wee bit trickier just in terms of time management. So between work and everything, I still haven't had time to see the Fiji result. I am going to watch it. Just need time. But yeah, Fiji are up into 8th from 10th. So they move up from 76.4 to 77.95, 21-14 over France in France. And that cascades down to these teams. So France drop, Argentina drop, both those teams having losses. Japan kind of steady. They had a win over Russia. I don't know. No, their points difference didn't change. Russia not close enough to them for that. The USA are up one. even though they lost to Ireland, because again, no change on the points being such a big gap between the teams. Georgia are back on the board. My Georgian magnet is no longer off on its lonesome. The Georgians are on the board up into 13th, up from 15th. Georgia had a win over Tonga, so they are up a point, almost a point. Tonga, on the other hand, are down one, having lost to Georgia from 12th, 73.84, and now 73.02. And just off the board is Italy, who, apart from that win over Georgia, didn't have the most productive of Novembers, but with the Wallabies and All Blacks coming into town, I suppose it didn't make life kind of all that easy for them. It wasn't, it weren't games they were ever favourites to win or even really to get close, so it didn't end up happening. Samoa also off the board on 16th, staying at 16th. They beat Spain in the recent games as well, so good for them to pick up a win. They have moved their points up, but they are still like four points on the scale, kind of behind Italy. So there's a pretty big gap. Whereas Italy are only kind of half a point behind Tonga, so they're not too far off the board. So yeah, those are the rugby rankings for the ending of 2018. Steve Hansen says Ireland should pretty much be number one, having just had that clash with New Zealand. I guess kind of he's pushing that media pressure ball back onto Ireland, saying they're number one, but Joe Schmidt kind of took that ball and flicked it right back, saying that, the All Blacks are at the end of their year and they've travelled halfway across the world. So I wouldn't call it mind games, but neither team, it kind of speaks to the characters of both the guys. Neither wants to come out and blow his own trumpet, so they're pretty content to just to do their own thing, focus on game to game, which is nice. Sometimes when guys get a bit up themselves, don't get all that popular. But Wales, I think proved any doubters, if there are still some, wrong by sweeping their November games. Believe it or not, though, I still have heard people saying, well, they didn't play Ireland or New Zealand, so it doesn't count for anything. That must get annoying, but what are you going to do? Six Nations will be the time where if they're going to start proving more points to people, not that they haven't done it already. It's been a pretty fantastic 2018 for Wales. If they're going to keep putting that point across, Six Nations will be the time to do it. England continuing their kind of recovery from a poor start to the year. And likewise the Box. I'll have to go back. I did see an article that was comparing Rassie Erasmus's record with Alistair Coetzee. I'll have to have a look at that to see how they compare at the minute. I haven't got that data in front of me, but that will be an interesting one. Still that very much feel-good feeling around the Box at the minute, I think, because they definitely seem to have turned a corner. You can kind of see what Rassie's doing. He's still, I really always compare it to a jigsaw, because he's still not quite sure which of his pieces are going to fit together the best. And like his management of the bench sometimes has been I guess less than optimal, but it's still him figuring out which players can do a job for him. So once he's got everything in a row, look at a guy like Gatland who's been in a job for yonks. He knows he's got his plan. So once Rassie has got that understanding, I think they're going to be another level above. What happens to Wallabies here? Lord knows that's the most troubling of probably all these teams. Scotland, you feel like on their day at home, are probably going to trouble most teams. France, yeah, man, it's just not quite Wallabies level, but it's a bit messy. Fiji, on the other hand, what a tour! They're really putting their foot down and wanting to be noticed. So yeah, 9 minutes. I better wrap this up. Argentina, before I do, I feel like they're on the right track as well, but perhaps a step further back than some of the other teams. Mario Ledesma, you back him to improve, because the results seem to have been already a fair bit improved under him for the Pumas. So given a wee bit more time, hopefully he can kind of keep that run on going. You guys let me know your thoughts on these rankings. How do you think this kind of impacts on 2019? Do you think this fairly kind of reflects which teams should be favourites? Because, I mean, just from me, would you really say France is the ninth most likely team to win the World Cup, or would you give them a better shout than some teams who traditionally in World Cup time don't seem to lift as much? Like there are some teams which seem to be kind of like those World Cup teams, like Argentina, France, just to name a couple. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on the rankings. And yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.